I've had a lot of questions about this binding. After I did the video on the square back Bradel binding, Peter Verheyen suggested I'd be interested in this variation. I was aware of this version, often known as the three-piece Bradel binding, but I'd never done one before. But following Peter's instructions in his 2009 article, Der gebrochene Rücken, a variation of the German case binding, I've done a few of these now, so I thought about how to go about doing a video on it. Now, in Peter's article, he describes doing an inboards version. So he builds up the spine on the book, covers the boards, and then attaches the boards. In the article, he also says that it could be done as a cased book. So the text block that we've just been looking at was left over from the edge colouring video, and I've been meaning to cover it. So now I'm skipping ahead and showing you the future. Here are the three components of the three-part Bradel binding. I've got the two covers and the spine piece, and in this preview I'm just putting the three pieces together to make the case. Now you can see the flap of the spine is going into a broad groove in the edge of the board, so that it ends up being flush with the inside of the board. So the first thing is to make these boards with this wide groove. So I've chosen 20 millimeters for the width of this groove in the board. You could do 15, 20, 25, it's up to you. 20 seems a good number. So I'm making each of the boards out of two pieces of 1 millimeter grey board. So I'm going to make them oversized and then trim them to the size of the book later. So I started by straightening up two edges, and that will be the inside edge of this groove. Now I'll do the groove 25 millimeters and then trim that up to 20 millimeters later. In Peter's article, he suggests this binding structure looks best on smaller books. So the text block that I'm using is actually the notes from 1983 of my original bookbinding teacher. So she went to the UK and studied with a lot of people, and she's shared those notes, and I've made a copy. And it's not a really thick book, and I just sewed them unsupported on a French link stitch and wrapped a piece of scrim for extra support around the spine. Now I've made the rough boards, I'll cut the spine piece. I'll use 1 millimeter board, so there'll be half the thickness of the cover boards, and I'll do the thickness of the book at the spine plus 1 board thickness, so plus 2 millimeters. So I'll cut that to the length of the boards, the length of the boards, and the boards will be the length of the book plus the squares, and I've decided to do 3 millimeter squares, which was probably a little large for this smaller book. 2 millimeter squares is probably better on a small book. Now I'm just going to glue this spine piece to a piece of strong paper. As most people know, I usually use Permalife because it's commonly available, and then use your bone folder to define down the edges of the board through the paper. Trim to length. And now, if you haven't already done it, it's time to pick the covering materials. So I decided to use one of the paste papers I made recently, one of the ones that's got some imperfections at each end because I don't need a lot of it. And then a spine material, and I had this this cloth from somewhere, a small piece of it, so I decided to use that because I thought it matched the paste paper. Now I'll cover the spine piece with the cloth. Now I want to make sure I go at least 30 millimeters either side of the spine board, because I need the 20 millimeters the flap that goes into the cover boards, and I'm going to do a 7mm joint between the spine piece and the boards. So that's 27mm, so 3mm gives me a bit of breathing room. So I'll put that down, and again, using the bone folder, push that down either side of the spine board. And then it's trimming the head and tail, 15, 20mm, your choice, and turning in. I get questions about my choices in adhesives. So I'm using PVA for everything in this project because I'm working fast. Now, if you're a bit nervous about any of the steps, you can replace the PVA with mix, so a 50-50 mix between PVA and paste, and that gives you reversibility. If I wanted to, if I'd used mix, I could pull these turn-ins back out and redo them. But with straight PVA, I'm committed. Once I turn them in, they're done. So if you want, you could use mix for most of these steps. So now I'm going to go back and trim the groove along the edge of the boards to 20mm. And then we'll cut the boards to size. So we do the usual thing of squaring up a corner. So we've got the straight edge now, which is towards the spine of the book. So we'll do the square up one end, then measure the height of the book, add 2 times 3 for the squares. That will give us the height of the boards, so measure the boards to the correct height. And then we have to work out the width of the boards. Now, whenever possible, I like to attach the boards to the book and then trim the width and then cover the boards. Now, in this case, that's not possible. So we're just going to have to hold everything in place and as best we can and measure. But before we do that, we have to cut the flaps on the side of the spine piece to the correct width. Now, as I said before, 20mm to go into the boards and 7mm for the joint. Now, I hope everyone saw what I did there. I measured 37mm one end and 27 the other. It could have been worse. Now, I tried holding everything together to measure the width of the boards, but it just wasn't possible. There's too many pieces, too hard to hold together. So I used a trick that's pretty common in bookbinding, and that is to hold things together temporarily with a couple of tiny dabs of adhesive. So I'll put a few spots of adhesive on the boards and put it all together and let it set for a few minutes. And then I will wrap the case around the text block and mark the foredges for trimming. And then I'll pull it all apart. But before I do that, I better put some headbands on the text block. And because I completely forgot about it till now, I'm just going to quickly grab some machine-made headbands and stick them on. Now's the time to mark the front and the back of the book so that it matches up to the case correctly. There may be some small asymmetries in the book. Push the text block firmly back into the case and open it up and mark the squares. I'm using the same square as the head and tail, so 3mm, which was probably the correct square for the foredges, and 2 would have been better for the head and tail. And now it's time to pull it apart. Also mark the spine piece, because now we're pulling it off the boards. As you can see, they stuck very well. I probably used more adhesive than I needed. I should have quickly rubbed those dabs of board off then, but I'll do it in a couple of minutes, so it's neither here nor there. If you have trouble getting those off, a little bit of moisture will help them come off. So now we'll cover the boards. So I'll cut some cover material. I forgot to wax this paper, so I'm going to quickly do that now, which is how I finish all my paste papers. I just rub it with a soft cotton cloth with some beeswax. So you want your covering material to be larger than the boards by more than the turn-ins, and at the spine edge we want it to be the same width as the width of the groove. To measure the width of the spine edge turn-in, I'll turn it over and crease it on the edge of the groove, and then fold it back out and trim it. And then I'll use my turn-in gauge to trim the other turn-ins. Then I will cut the outside corners at 45 degrees, but it's important not to do the turn-ins. We'll turn in the spine edge and glue that, and then attach the boards to the spine piece. Then we'll do all the other turn-ins. For the corners at the spine edge, we're going to do a little trick. We're going to cut this little tongue that's going to lay down on the top of the board. It's best seen in Peter's article. You can see that little tab, he calls it. And I'll demonstrate how to cut that now. And that tab's the width of the board that's going to lay along, which is only 1 millimeter wide. So there's not much to it, but it's enough to just provide a bit of protection to that corner. I'm going to pre-crease the turn-ins at the spine because I want these to be a really good fit. Now we'll attach the boards to the spine piece. Now you don't want to put too much adhesive on here. You don't want squeeze out, especially along that foredge. So I show two different ways about going about this. Both of them just trying to use as little adhesive as possible while making sure that you have enough, because you really don't want the book coming apart at this point. Now it's time to complete the turn-ins, and as usual, head and tail first, then the foredge. If you get the chance, it's a really good idea to test used equipment before you buy it. I'm thinking of buying this old pot foiling machine, but having tried to use it now, it's got a terrible chase, and I think I'm going to change my mind and give it a miss. The last step is to case in the book. So it's a matter of getting the text block in position, pasting out the end papers and closing the book. I highly recommend using paste. This is the one step where it's easy to go wrong, and if you're using straight PVA like I am now, there's no coming back, but with paste you can usually peel back the paste down and have a second try. And because paste does penetrate, it's especially good for gluing paper to board. And if the paste down stretches and you don't pre-trim it and it stretches out beyond the text block, it's easier to trim that up later. Don't forget to put in barrier sheets between the text block and the case before you put it in the press. I'm just going to leave this in the press for 10 minutes and then I'll open it up and let it dry. So if you weren't already familiar with this binding structure, I hope this video has helped clarify what it is and how it works. Overall, I think this is one of the ugliest books that I've ever bound. But for inspiration, go to the internet and search on three-piece Bradel binding, or look at Peter Verheyen's website. He's got some beautiful versions of this binding for inspiration. As always, if you've enjoyed today's video, please hit the big thumbs up button. And if you want to be notified of my future videos, please hit the subscribe button. And until next time, cheerio.